minutes until showtime. 3 minutes until showtime. 2 minutes until showtime. 1 minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
If you wish, dial 914-803-4131, 914-803-4131. Just leave your well, not your whole phone number, but your area code in the YouTube chat, so I know who it is that is calling, so we can do somewhat of a job of screening the calls. You can also leave questions, comments, etc. that I'll respond to in the YouTube chat, Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube. If you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, just head on over to the YouTube channel, and you can join us in the chat there. I like the interface much better than the chat room in Blog Talk Radio. So if you happen to be listening over there and you want to ask a question, just hop on over to YouTube and watch it there as well. And if you haven't subscribed to me on YouTube, that's the best way you can support the show. Please subscribe to the channel. Like the video, share it with your friends, share other videos with your friends. I'm trying to get that 1,000 so I can be monetized. We'll see if it happens. Don't know if it will or not, but, gotta hope for the best, right? Yeah, so just, I guess, updates on me. Friday night, all of a sudden, I decide to, go, and I was going to go take the trash out. And so I grab up a bunch of the bags and I go take the trash out, and I open the door, and, well, as you know, my mother-in-law has been living with us. And, well, I look out on the front and I see no car. We drove her car from her house, which is just around the block, to our house so we could keep a better eye on it. Keep a better eye on it, and if we need to use it, we could use it, and whatever. It'll be easier for us to run it from time to time to make sure, it doesn't just sit there and waste away into nothingness or whatever. So I go out at around 12:15-ish or so, and I'm like, wait a second, there's no car there. And I come back in, I go check the cameras or whatever. It's like, I don't see anything popping up on my cameras as to what happened and when did it move. I'm thinking to myself, well, did my wife have to go run an errand and just, not tell me? Like I was maybe too invested in the TV show to hear her like head out to go do something. I mean, it's possible. I'd have to go to Walgreens or something. I don't know. So I walk upstairs, and of course there she is, just sleeping away. And I'm like, well, I guess I have to wake her up then. And I wake her up and I tell her, look, her car got stolen. So we do have cameras in front of our house, but here's the thing with the cameras in front of our house. The whole viewing area of the cameras included the street, but because we don't have that well traveled of a street, but it's traveled well enough that everybody that would pass by, everybody that would walk by on the sidewalk, in front of our house, everybody that would drive by on the street out there, anybody who would walk by on the street on there would trigger the cameras. And so it would just drain the battery needlessly because it wasn't really catching anything. And the reason we had the cameras was to see anybody coming up to the front door, or to see if anybody was messing with our cars, which are both in the driveway. So I limited the cameras have a function where you could draw a little window. This is the only area where I want you to trigger and start recording stuff. So if you set something outside of it, don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. I don't need it. And I did the same thing. So I covered the front walkway and the driveway with the one camera, and I covered the front walkway just up until the sidewalk with the other one. And yeah, I forgot that it was set up that way, and I didn't change it to be that way for my grandmother's, to fit my mother-in-law's car there. And so we did not catch it being stolen. Our across the street neighbor has a Ring camera, and they caught it getting stolen, but it's a Ring camera, so it's not very good. The image was terrible, and you basically could make out the body trying to mess with the window or something, or mess with the door, and then the car disappeared. So it's all in all, it sucks. And furthermore, the wheelchair that we had, that my wife used to bring her into the one appointment, and we were going to use the wheelchair for my son's birthday party on Sunday. We just left the wheelchair in the car because we figured, well, let's keep the wheelchair in the car and make it easier so we don't have to bring it in and out all the time. Well, the wheelchair is gone too. They didn't even think to bring it out. Yeah, hers is a Kia Soul. So yeah, we should have gotten a steering wheel club, but we did not do that, and unfortunately, it done got stolen, and there's no sign of it. Like, apparently, the person who's investigating it for Geico has connections and can do searches on the red light not the red light cameras, but on all the crime cameras around the city to see if the drivers or if the license plate had been picked up. No. Nobody has picked it up, so we're thinking it must be in one certain area if it hasn't passed any sort of crime cameras. Still, nothing has been found yet. So Kinky Street's in a container to Africa. It very well might be. Who knows? Basically, the insurance gives it 15 days, and if nothing comes of it, then 15 days later they'll start the process, I guess, of paying out the claim less the $500 deductible. So there was that. That was the big stress over the weekend, and then of course you have the fun over the weekend was the fact that we had my kid's birthday party, so we had fun with that. But yeah, so see, Jeff Curry, I put out a new game camera, more high tech. I got 900 pictures of grass blowing and leaves falling. Yeah, so. And that's one thing. Like, a friend of mine said, puts an Apple AirTag or something in the back of her car so if the car gets stolen, they could see where it is. Well, we didn't think. Hindsight's 2020, I suppose. Jeff Curry asked, "What is the deal with the Kias being stolen?" Apparently, there is a hack that people were sharing on TikTok, where basically showing people how to steal Kias. And basically, there's a hack where if you break the steering column, there's a USB port that will allow you to bypass whatever would be there that would require you to turn. That would prevent you from turning the key without having an actual key in there. So that was spread, I guess, all over TikTok. And unfortunately, many people have been the victims of that TikTok phenomenon, or the TikTok thing that went viral or whatever. So yeah, that sucks. But I was going to say one more thing and I forgot. Oh yeah, and because it's a key, the car actually uses a key to start instead of being a push to start. It doesn't have GPS tracking, so we can't find it that way. If my wife's car gotten stolen, it would have GPS tracking, and we could have then tracked it and saw where it was. But they didn't take that one because she has a Kia too. I don't know if the Seltos is one of the ones that can be affected by that thing that went viral on TikTok, though. So I don't know. It's, it sucks. People are terrible.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. So there's that. Also want to make sure Patty, our friend P-Dubs in the chat, has set up a GoFundMe. We were talking a little bit about what was going on with her a few weeks back. I went ahead and sharing it again. Just Aaron and Jolie can go ahead and share that as well various times of the show. I think we all want to help each other. I think we all want to, do our part to make sure that we all are good. So please make sure to, if you can, just throw a few shekels toward P-Dubs' way, and I'm sure it'll be very much appreciated. Share the link as well on Twitter or whatever. I'll probably post it to my Twitter as well if you want to just retweet it. I'd be very appreciative for you to help do that. Some of y'all helped my friend when they were having issues with their custody for their kid. Apparently in that case, I think there's going to be a hearing in less than 2 weeks. I think 2 Tuesdays from now, they'll actually have a hearing, and hopefully it will go in my friend's way so that they can have custody of their kiddo without having to worry about their kid being abused. So here's hoping that works out well. I usually don't spend this much time on whatchamacallit. Oh, again, support other ways to support the show. I guess we'll circle back to that. You can Venmo me. You could buy me a cider. Just go to liberaldan.com, click the buy me a cider button, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/liberaldanradio and buy me a cider that way. I don't drink coffee. I drink cider. So you can support the show that way, or you can become a Liberal Dan Radio patron, patreon.com/liberaldan or patreon.liberaldan.com. Either way will get you there, and you can support the show monthly as well. But again, the best and most important thing is to make sure to get your friends and family and enemies, coworkers, acquaintances, people you pass on the street, etc., to subscribe to subscribe to the channel. Remember, I also go live Tuesdays and Thursdays on Twitch, doing gaming streaming. Of course, we do sometimes talk politics whilst gaming as well, but I'm monetized there, so I do try to spend some time there to enable myself to get more subscribers and more, especially with the Amazon Prime free subscription. So let's see. Kinky Streets. I gave my bro a Pontiac Parisienne 30 years ago, same car as Chevy Impala. Told him to park in the garage since it's a pauper livery car. It was stolen the first night on the street. Oh, jeez. Yeah. This is the second car that my mother-in-law has had stolen from her. I mean, I think the first one was in maybe the late 80s or something like that. But yeah, I don't think I've ever had a car stolen. I used to, when I was in college and I took a year off and I worked downtown at Pat O'Brien's on Bourbon Street. A friend of mine in my fraternity, he was working offshore at the time, so he would work 3 weeks off on the rig as a chef, and then 1 week he would come back. And so when he wanted his car to not be sitting around and idling and doing nothing and just everything sitting there, so he was like, you could use my car when I'm not in town. Just drive me down there and I'll get a ride back, but just drive me down there and you can have the car. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's awesome. So all of a sudden one day I park it near his house because I figured, I know there's a parking spot that's usually available because people think it's not a parking spot, but it is. So I would normally park right there and then walk into work from there. That way allowing myself to not have to worry about taking the streetcar and catching the streetcar. We're having to wait like a whole hour or have to catch a cab. So one day I come up to where the car was parked and there's broken glass. And so it was stolen. Of course, I didn't know the license plate number and everything like that. I thought I'd try and get in contact with him. Turns out the car was repossessed, not stolen. I was like, it would have been nice of you to tell me because I've been sitting here worrying my ass off that I lost your car for you. So, and if you would have told me that they were going to repossess it, I could have parked it somewhere else and not near your house. People are silly. Anyway, so we got Julie, the first Liberal Dan Radio producer. She's in the chat. Bicycle Mike, P-Dubs, Kimchi, Aaron, Jolie, TV2. Did I say Bicycle Mike already? Alarasia. Cynthia from Texas. Who else we got in the chat? Jeff Curry. Shouts out to everyone. Thank you for joining us so far. Appreciate it very muchly. So, of course, shouts out to all the Liberal Dan Radio patrons. Wes, Jolie, Aaron, Demonox, your boy Chris, Cesar from California, etc. Ryan. Hey John, how's it going? What else? So what else are we going to talk about? What do we got to talk about today? Well, one of the things I did want to talk about is the fact that we had these, 2 bank failures going on over the course of the weekend, and kind of discuss it all along the terms of capitalism and how we don't really have capitalism in this country because we don't allow capital to fail when it does. We don't let just things wither on the vine and die, and sometimes it's the fact that sometimes they say they can't let it die. Yes, I had Credit Suisse on there as well as things to talk about. So let's see. NPR has it. Let's see. 2 bank failures has federal government taking extraordinary action. The FDIC announced this morning it transferred all deposits of Silicon Valley Bank to a newly created bridge bank. customers will regain access to their money today. The bank, which had about $175 billion in deposits, collapsed, making it the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history. Regulators in New York shut down Signature Bank over the weekend, so how stable is the American banking system, etc. So, and usually when a bank fails, the FDIC insures your deposit in each bank for up to $250,000. So with me, it's like if you have that much money where you have over $250,000 in banks, why not put it in different banks? Diversify the risk that you're not so you're not having any risk. I would put $250,000 in one bank, $250,000 in another bank. I would make sure that my funds are spread out, and no one bank failing would cause me ultimate problems, and everything would be covered, because if the bank failed and I had less than $250,000, guess what? I'm covered, and I'll get my money back. Kick your sheet. So far, Biden's been a mistake is reappointing Trump, appointing Jerome Powell to second term. Liz Warren was right. Bernie Sanders was correct. Absolutely. I agree with you on that. I can't over the whole woke bank nonsense. What are we talking about with the woke bank? Not exactly sure. Let's see. I read there's another Trump phone call to a Georgia official. I'll have to see about that. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not. But anyway, so the feds have basically said that they're kind of waiving that $250,000 limit, and they're going to pay off, let everybody have all of their money. I'm like, well, is that the right thing to do? I mean, if you put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, that might be a little bit your fault. But do you allow the things to tumble and crash the economy down? That's the other side of the coin. Now, I think one thing that liberals, leftists, conservatives, everybody should seem to agree with the general principle that most of us are angry at the idea that we rescue these banks. But and I don't know if that's necessarily the same thing as what other, because I don't know if we're rescuing the bank, so to speak, because that's what, like Boebert was saying or whatever. I don't necessarily think that we're rescuing the bank, but we're taking care of the things that it had a fiduciary responsibility over when it came to protecting their money. But with private corporate institutions, regardless of what the corporation is, there's less and less oversight because Republicans want less and less oversight. So people are allowed to do stupid shenanigans, and they're able to, do things like pay themselves out bonuses when the company is failing. That they pay themselves out bunches of money, and sometimes they want to add some regulations in there that would stop that, but it shouldn't have been allowed in the first place. Bicycle Mike, screw the bank but make the depositors whole. Absolutely. But I think one of the biggest mistakes we have is the fact that we do have this sort of this corporate protection on people, that there's some restrictions on what you can or not do, and what you can and can be convicted of a crime on when it comes to corporate actions. But we have enabled this system, this capitalistic system that we have. We've enabled a system in such a way that people just get away with dumb stuff all the time. I've talked about short selling. There's no reason why short selling should be a thing. The creation of a short sale is the thought of some evil genius who was like, I'm going to think of a way where I can, if I know that a corporation is going down, I'm going to think of a way to be able to make money off of it. I'm going to short it. And so therefore, I'm going to sell it now and buy it later so that I make a whole crap ton of money. You shouldn't be able to do that. It's stupid. There's when they had the bank, the low income housing that the federal government passed, and all these banks took all of these low income housing mortgages, wrapped them up into securities, and then sold them as the next best thing since sliced bread, so they could basically make money off of these things. And then the housing market comes crashing down and everybody loses a crap ton of money. Well, again, you're basically allowing these corporations to sell these securities off in such a way that they now are making money over kind of almost fraudulent type of deals. So So these are two regional banks. Trump walked back Obama regulations that would have prevented these failures. Of course Trump did. I mean, of course, the Republicans are the problem, mostly, when it comes to this sort of stuff. Now, there are corporatist Democrat types who do kind of, lean the wrong way when it comes to banking. And yeah, that's Bank of America and Countrywide. I've had both so far. But it's just like, even the creation of stocks, I've talked about this before on the podcast, even the creation of stocks is just like, seems to me to be like, we should have never implemented the stock market. Like, it should have never happened. Like, we should have funded capitalist venture either with loans or bonds, and that be it. Stock is silly, because now you can have ownership in a company. I mean, you can own a company, and maybe you go in to sell someone, but have it all be private ownership. Don't have it be where you can do shenanigans all over the place with all of the stuff that goes on in the market, and the amount of stuff that you can do in the stock market is just a recipe for disaster. So let's see. 7 call to Ralston around deceased for second phone call to Ralston, a now deceased former Georgia official. Oof. We'll have to get that audio and deal with it at some point. See, my week was already made. I was in live chat with the first female general manager in Major League Baseball, Kim Ng, Florida Marlins, hired by Derek Jeter, and she answered my questions. That's awesome. Yes, we need Dodd-Frank. We probably need more than Dodd-Frank, but we need to at least bring back Dodd-Frank. But one of the other things is, like, because and one of the reasons that I have a problem with stocks in general, I mean, they are what they are, and that it's the system that we live in. So obviously we have to invest in stocks if you want to have some sort of investment vehicle for the future, because it's hard to unring that bell. I'm just saying we should have never dealt with it to begin with. But like, the Credit Suisse Corporation from England, their stock fell like 15% almost today because people are concerned about certain instabilities. And when the markets are finicky and the markets react and panic and start selling off their stocks because they don't like what a particular company is doing, and if that company is involved in banking, then you're going to end up having a situation where, just consumer fears could cause an utter crash of the entire market. It's just a ridiculous system that we have in place. And what do we do about it? Do you conservative? Again, I said one thing that we should all agree on is that when these wealthy owners of any corporation, banks or what have you, when they drive their companies into the ground, they should not be rescued. Now, the people, if they're running a bank, if you're running a bank and if you're the people who in the bank should be made whole. But we should also have a system where we protect it so that we don't have to go break the rules or bend the rules in such a way. Like, basically say, look, $250,000 is all you should be putting in a bank. And if you're putting more in a bank, maybe that is your fault. Maybe you shouldn't have put all of your eggs in those baskets. See, CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, Becker, was appointed to the San Francisco Federal Reserve Board by Trump. He voted for Trump, gave political donations to Trump, of course. After the crash, the billionaires all buy it all up. Exactly, that's the thing. Billionaires are going to reign billionaires, and everything comes down. The prices tumble, and then they all buy it up, and then they get more money. It's as simple as that. Again, because you can manipulate the system to benefit the wealthy. The system does not benefit the working class. The system does not benefit anybody. And this show is mostly going to be about capitalism, because here's what capitalism does. We used to have a system where you had pensions. You'd work for a company and you would have a pension. And I saw the biggest, well, young people like the fact that we have 401ks because it allows them to go from job to job, like they want to do. I'm like, that's just more corporatist BS. That's just more people trying to justify bad behavior. The 401k, the history of the 401k, it's not something that was made for everybody. The 401k was created so that wealthy people could put aside more money on a tax-deferred basis. So they could basically say, okay, well, we have a pension and we have this, we have that. I would like to take some more of my money and I want to be able to invest it and stock it away for the future. And I would like the tax on that to be deferred so I can basically put it in as a pre-tax deduction. That's what the 401k was initially made for. So what happened? Well, companies started realizing, well, if because of there are regulations on what we have to have when it comes to funding, the future liabilities, instead of having to worry about keeping that amount of money in these pension funds to make sure that we could cover our future, the next several many years of whatever our future payments are going to be, we're going to switch from that and we're going to go directly to a 401k and we're going to put everybody in that. So when I started working for my first job out of college, it was at an insurance company and they literally had just changed it to a 401k. So I was working with some people who were earning pensions, and I was working with some people who were newer, who were only getting a 401k. And then there was people who were getting hybrids, because at one point they stopped the pension accumulation, and then they told everybody else, at this point, you're all going to get 401ks. So basically, their pensions was based on the last 3 years of salary at that point. So any raises that they got into the future were not counting towards the amount of pension money that they would have. So it was just another way to manipulate the amount of money that they would have to have in those pension systems, because now they no longer have to worry about, this person's going to be having this person's last 3 years of salary when we had pensions was this, therefore we don't have to calculate it off of anything in the future. But some of the other things that these companies did is, like, when the stock market was booming way back in the day, and these pension funds had just huge surpluses. And I forget the name of the company that did it, but I think it was a company in Virginia, maybe. So the company took the pensions and they dissolved the pensions, and they said, look, we're going to take your money from the pensions, like that's yours, that's supposed to, that by the minimum amount of money that we're supposed to have to cover your unfunded liabilities, to fund your pension in the future, we're going to take that money and you're going to get to put it in a 401k. And then, so they did that for every employee, and left afterwards was a big chunk of money that was left that they got to now keep as the company and pass out to their executives, because, we're smart corporatists. We won the game. We figured out how to play the game. And then, of course, when the stock market crashed down, all of these people's investments who would have previously been required to be covered by their employers, and that nice little cushion that they had would have softened that blow, and they still would have had probably enough money to pay off the future pensions. In this case, these people's pensions, their money that they're supposed to use for future incomes, sank, while these rich board members and CEO and whatever, they got more money, because that's how you manipulate the system. The system is always going to be how about opening the Liberal Dan's Louisiana Savings and Loan? Yeah, that's all we need. That's all we need, because Joseph Gibson is going to come in and then make comments about me being a banker, and then I'm just going to perpetuate stereotypes, and nobody wants that. See, Kinky Streets, my friend got the easy job at Tesla. He drives around the Chargers, fixing them all in the North Country of New York. They gave him a Tesla to do it in. All he does is reset breakers and change the cords. That's pretty neat. Let's see. If anyone knows of a job I could do remotely, would you give heads up? Yeah, I will definitely keep my heads up. What do you do, P-dubs? Like, what exactly? I mean, there's usually, like, I don't know, there's medical billing, but I don't know, you have to have some training in that previously. I don't know. There's lots of customer service jobs that are available to be working from. Have to find a way to link to some or whatever. I can do a quick search. It just depends on what your skill sets are on that one. Peter Thiel is the finance version of Eric Prince. The world doesn't need trillionaires. The world doesn't need billionaires. There's no ethical billionaires. I used to go at that statement, but I fully agree. There's nobody who's become a billionaire who's done so ethically, because your billions have been earned in part off of poor pay to marginalized people, to disenfranchisement and stealing of resources of people in third world countries, etc. There's no trillionaire, there's no $1 trillion company or billionaire, there's no billionaire, there's no $1 trillion companies that I can look at and say, oh yeah, they did everything ethically. They're wonderful people and they're altruistic and everything that was done was nice and sweet and no shenanigans at all. Yeah, it's always shenanigans. Always shenanigans. Let's see. So that's I mean, but everything that we do, again, it's to benefit we even when, I mean, Trump was president, but during the pandemic we had the PPP program, and that we shouldn't have had the PPP program. Now I benefited from it. I was able to, because I was an independent contractor at the beginning of the pandemic, I was able to take advantage of the amount of money, the maximum amount of money that I could get from PPP, and it was fun and helped me. It was wonderful. But we shouldn't have done it that way. We absolutely should not have done it that way, because the way we did it was going to be paid back anyway, so why not distribute it directly to the people who are working or who were working? We should have done it. We should have combined the unemployment, the boost, and the PPP, and basically said, look, instead of it being unemployment, we're going to make this a non-income stipend of some sort that's going to allow people to, if they do have to work, it'll count towards their hazard pay. Like, I'll basically say, look, you're going to be working, but you're going to be paid more through this money because, you know, we want you to be able to, you know, accept that risk with a little extra money. But if you can't work, we still want you to be able to pay your bills and do anything else that you might need to do, eat, etc., with that money. And if you would have done it that way, instead of doing it with a PPP loan, you don't risk people like Fogo de Chao and other unethical companies from taking advantage of the PPP loans and getting them when they shouldn't have, or when they didn't need to. You could have just simply said, look, everybody who is a working age American person can get X amount of money every week until this whole thing is over with, and it probably would have been much more simpler to implement, probably would have been much less need of oversight. Of course, Trump didn't want any oversight overall because he wanted those people, he wanted those companies to be able to take advantage of PPP loans and to be able to abuse the system without having to worry about pesky government regulations. So you end up having people like MTG and Pizzagates and Boba the Clown and other people who are basically just, you know, grifters who are grifting off the system, who are taking advantage of this, but then complaining when students get their loans written off. I remember I was reading past blog posts that I had made, or maybe it was in my Facebook history, where it was basically that we had just bailed out or something like 1.4, I think it was the beginning of the pandemic, like they injected like $1 trillion or something. The Fed put like $1 trillion into the stock market to kind of sturdy it up, and it didn't do squat. It did nothing to help anybody. It just, like, basically the money was created and then it was put off into the ether. And then the thing that pissed me off is like the amount of money that they used for that was pretty much the amount of money that student loans that are out there. They could have just paid everybody's student loans off. Boom, that would be the end of it. And we wouldn't have to worry about student loans currently, and then we just have to worry about whatever student loans coming in the future, and which of course needs to be dealt with because we need to have a system where it's not ridiculously expensive to go to get a college education. But we would have been able to have more people having more liquidity because they wouldn't have to be spending money to go into they wouldn't have to be spending money to pay off these loans, and it wouldn't have cost over $1 trillion. It would have cost very little of that $1 trillion of debt, because again, much of the debt is federally held, and as such, it's money that already was spent. Since it was already spent, it doesn't cost any additional money to just say delete. So you can't keep it. But all of the PPP loans didn't have to be paid back. That's my point, is that I got 2 PPP loans. Both were forgiven because I was an independent contractor, so therefore it was by default all my salary. So you had to prove that you provided, that you paid money to these. You had to prove that you paid the people enough money to cover the percentage that was required to be paid towards payroll in order for you to take advantage of the PPP loan. And then, but if you didn't, and at the end of the day, you didn't get it forgiven because you didn't meet the threshold, you still got a very cheap loan. It was just these companies were able to take advantage of it and just get cheap loans, even if they weren't eligible to get the loans forgiven, to the detriment of the people who very well needed the money from the PPP loans, which is why I'm saying we should have never done PPP in the first place. It should have just been not a handout, but it should have just been like a temporary UBI, if sort of thing. Ken QB, we cannot give money to people. That would be socialism. Giving money to companies is capitalism. Exactly. That's part of the problem, is that Republicans will cry about socialism, except for when we have socialism that benefits corporations. Let's see. Boo. I actually shut off my laptop. Muscle relaxers are fun. Good job. I know Boebert and MTG did actually do that. Boba the Clown. Trump thought the PPP loans were his way to bribe everybody to vote for him. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people who got left in the dust with the PPP loans because of all of the corporations with their high-powered, attorneys and accountants and everything like that. They all were able to jump on those applications and get it all done and scoop up all the money, leaving a lot of people who really needed the PPP loans in the dust. So MTG and Co didn't have to prove anything, prove me wrong. I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they just said this is what we did, and because Trump didn't deal with any sort of ways to check, because the oversight was yeeted in this thing because he doesn't like oversight. He basically enabled people to grift the system. Again, when Donald Trump said he wanted to turn Washington upside down or whatever, it was because he wanted to shake it like a couch and get all the money that falls out. Let's see. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to move on to the next thing. One of the next things, which is, it was interesting. One of the wives, for some reason I got in my notifications on Twitter, one of the wives of one of the people who were in jail or in prison, I should say at this point, for their actions on the January 6th insurrection, was complaining about the fact that her husband was a so-called political prisoner. A political prisoner, and they drove 12 miles just to see her husband, and they were told that they were turned away because they could not, because for some reason, I guess they were short-staffed or whatever, but they were not going to be able to see her insurrectionist husband, and so she posted a video of her kiddos crying because she was not able. And then, of course, she's a grifter because she put up the conservative version of GoFundMe to try and raise money, and apparently she's raised over $50,000 to try and free her husband. Yeah, it's just the amount of grift that they have. This is Andrea Young. Kyle Young is the person who is the insurrectionist. Kyle Young is one of the people that beat on one of the police officers. I'm forgetting the name of the police officer. I'm trying to scroll down. I think it's one with it. Fanone. It was Fanone. Had an N in it, but Fanone spoke out at the end of the trial. I think towards the sentencing, and at the end of the trial, Kyle Young, whatever. Young basically apologized for what he did and said that he hoped that one day that Fanone could forgive him. Yet, Andrea Young, Kyle Young's wife, posted some video that said, this is why Fanone lied. Fanone lied. Said, trying to put, well, if Fanone lied, why did your husband plead guilty? If Fanon lied, why did he ask Fanon for that he hopes one day that Fanon will forgive him? If Fanon lied, why is there video evidence out there that shows Fanon getting grabbed by Kyle Young, showing Kyle Young handing somebody a taser, showing Kyle Young having brought his 16-year-old son with him to the insurrection, showing Kyle Young doing various other things which caused the judge to basically call him a human wrecking ball. Yeah, so of course everybody's like, oh, we're so sorry for you, we feel so sorry. Yes, he's a political prisoner. No, he's a traitor. You know, somebody's like, the justice system failed. It might have even been her, said the justice system failed. And the only reason that the justice system failed here is because we used to treat treason with a much harsher penalty than just like 8 years. If you committed acts of treason, something else happened to you. Not that. So count your lucky stars that he wasn't convicted of treason, even though he probably could have been, because he attacked his country. He attacked his own government. That should be treason in and of itself. And even some people who are going after the wife is like, if you do the crime, do the time. He broke the law. A jury found him to be guilty. I'm like, no, that's not the facts of the case. It wasn't a jury that found him guilty. He pled guilty. He said, I am guilty of these crimes. Now, are there people in our justice system who have pled guilty because it's easier for them to simply plead guilty and take a lesser sentence than it would be to fight because they don't have the wherewithal and the means to hire a decent attorney to be able to fight the case for them, poke holes in the prosecution, and show why the prosecution's case does not meet the standards that would require a guilty verdict? Absolutely. Those people exist. This is not an example of those people because there's clear video evidence that we've all seen, except maybe Tucker Carlson and anybody who watches the show. We've all seen the footage of him assaulting a cop, of him attacking police officers, of him there doing bad actions at the insurrection. So no, rot in jail, rot in prison. Let's see, whatever. P-Dubs, did you hear the Chinese guy who was owned, whatever that Bannon was found on, is in trouble for fraud? I did not hear that. Kicking Streets, they can pave my street, but New York State can give the Buffalo Bills $800 million for new stadium, even though the owners are billionaires. Yeah, there's a big conversation to be had about that, about money and sports and how things go, and especially college football, like, you know, where you pay the coach of the college football team more than like the highest paid administrator or highest paid teacher at the school, and whether or not that's going to, we could do a whole show on that. I have feelings kind of both ways on it, where there might not be situations where the government funding a stadium isn't in and of itself a bad idea, but there are other circumstances where it's ridiculous and there's no reason for it. There's a lot of stuff to go into there. I'm not ready to go into all that. I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole yet. Let's see. Alliteration, that's not the only contradictory defendant family representation. There have been others, I'm sure. Absolutely. Because again, these people are brainwashed. These people that's why Trump said he loves the poorly educated, because they can be easily manipulated. They could be, the one meme going around, Fox News, we lied. Fox News watchers, no, you didn't. Like, they're just going to dig in, and they're just going to, never going to agree that they were ever wrong, and they're just going to continue to double down on their ridiculousness. There's always parts of conservative, like, conspiracy theories and conservative arguments that are contradictory. Like, back when they were trying to say that Obama shouldn't have been president, people would make the argument that A, Obama was not a citizen at birth because of the situation of how he was born, even though he was. And then 2, they'll say, and he lost his citizenship when his parents moved to Indonesia and enrolled him in school there. Well, which is it? Did he not have citizenship, or did he have it and lose it? Like, there's always a contradiction. Almost every single time, you can always find a contradiction in what they say, in what they argue for. The college coaches are the highest paid public employees in some states. True. And briefly on that, if the college brings in more money because of the football team than it would otherwise, or if the football team is paying for itself, if the sports program is paying for itself, I should say, because I think there are requirements that require some of the money that comes in from football to pay for other things. To basically say to give other people opportunities to have scholarships to come to school and earn as well. If the football program is paying for itself like that, then I have no problem with the salaries of the coaches. If the success means they're going to be bringing in more money, more TV money, more commercial revenue, etc. So there's that. But if it's not worth it, then it's not worth it. Then you're basically making the educational system suffer just because you want to play some football. Jeff Curry, I asked a Fox viewer if he thought Fox would lose the lawsuit. He said, what lawsuit? Well, of course, because Fox News doesn't talk about the lawsuit, because Fox News doesn't want to talk about the lawsuit, because Fox News knows it's in deep crap. The school district superintendents are grossly overpaid too. They get contracts. It's nuts. And that's the worst thing is here in Louisiana, in New Orleans. We have a superintendent over the New Orleans public schools, but every public school is a charter school. So every charter school, or it's either every public school in New Orleans is a charter school, which means it's either in and of itself one entity, or it might be part of a group of charter schools. Like my kid's school has 3 campuses, so it's all part of one kind of umbrella. So every campus has its own principal, but there is a person who's in charge of the entire thing, and the person who's in charge of the entire thing here is an absolute dullard. But you have not just the school board to deal with, but then you have all these tiny little boards that you have to deal with as well. So all of these people making money hand over fist, trying to basically suck money out of the system. Let's see, Texas has the Robin Hood program. Plano has a $6 billion budget for it once was one time for 73 schools. Okay, let's see. Did I miss something there? My mom's cousin was school district superintendent in New York, where Mark Zuckerberg was from. He made fortunes. Zuck went to private high school, of course. There's the other thing I wanted to talk. There was another bunch of contradictions that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to bring up in that sort of discussion of the whole, it's one thing, but it's the other. Like there's the Obama thing, but there's other thing, but a lot of their conspiracy theories just have those contradictions where there's no consistency, and there's no requirement for consistency, because again, Trump loves the poorly educated, and if by Trump loving the poorly educated, it enables him to have him and other people like DeSantis to have contradictory opinions, and they're not going to argue with it because they're too dumb to understand that the opinions are contradictory. Or if Donald Trump contradicts himself, it's either he was joking, he really didn't mean it, but he said it, but this is really what he meant when he said it. And again, it's always a grift. It's always a scheme or a scam or some other means of fooling the public. And his public is easily fooled. Is this the one that I was looking for? I'm trying to find that comment, but I have lots of comments that have been responded to as well. There we go. I found it exactly. So the person posted in this group that I'm in, if Pence would have sent the electors back to the states, we would not have had January 6th. So January 6th is Pence's fault. So they'll say that January 6th was just a big tourist event. It was a big nothing. They were just peaceful protesters. But then it's Pence's fault. It's Pence's fault for what? That they were peacefully touring the Capitol, as y'all are trying to say? No. There's a contradiction there. They'll say COVID was not a big threat. They downplayed COVID. They said COVID was just the flu. But then if it's just the flu, then why are they saying that China created it as a weapon? It was either just the flu and not a harmful thing, or it's a harmful thing. Which one is it? Again, they'll also claim that January 6th was just harmless tourists, but then claim Antifa and the FBI were behind it. There's just so much stuff that goes on with their lack of consistency. I can see Wes. Hey, Wes, how are you? Cynthia from Texas once asked me, who's Mitch McConnell? Oh, my God. Well, again, the radio show I listen to in the mornings, a conservative, Jeff Crouere, he calls Mitch McConnell a rhino. Like, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is not a rhino. He's a die-hard, dyed-in-the-wool, pure 100% Republican. They just don't like him because rhino now means somebody who doesn't bend over backwards or forwards for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is the Republican Party. That's it. That's the end of it. College graduate in Texas tried to tell me the Earth is only 10,000 years old. I found projectile points older than that. Yeah. I love the young Earthers. The young Earthers are hilarious. Jeff Curry, I wrote that It's a Small World ride at Disney Florida. I could see a riot over that. I used to hate It's a Small World, except for the fact that once my kids started riding it and they looked really amazed at everything that was going on, that it was very cute watching the kids, looking around all in wonderment. So that's when I started enjoying It's a Small World. But before kids, no, I hated It's a Small World. Of course, back before we got married, my wife and her mom went to Disney World on their own, and I had to work or something or whatever. So she was mocking me, and she would say, "I'm gonna call you when I get on It's a Small World, just so you can hear the theme going on." Okay, so I decided to call her while I was on my way to go be a nerd. Go to the local gaming store. I gave her a call. Wes, I didn't block you. I gave a call, and all I hear is laughing at first, because when did I call her? The moment her butt hit the seat on the boat for It's a Small World is when her phone rang. So that's when we knew we had a link. So that's what we describe as our link, that connects us, so that we know what we're doing, and as such we can do things like call at times where it's like, hello. Like, she'll call me a lot of times, and she'll be like, "Where are you?" I'll be like wondering if I was on my way home at some point. And I was like, "I'm on Wall," which is very close to my house. So let's see. Boo, 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 boo. Don't call Erin a witch. Unless she wants to be called a witch. Then you can call her a witch. But, it's up to her. What's up, Joey Farrell? How's it going? Hey, Elizabeth. What else to talk about? I'm trying to get... There's somebody who's a local newscaster who did a series of videos on the public school system and what's going on with the public school system, I think, here in New Orleans. And apparently she won an award for it, but they only aired a couple of episodes of it. So I basically offered her on a friend's post on Facebook. I was like, "Hey, I'd love for you to come on my podcast. You can come on. We can discuss, what did get aired, what didn't get aired." She basically thinks that her investigation into what was going on ruffled a lot of feathers. And it very may well have, because, well, the system in New Orleans has ruffled lots of feathers and has pissed off a lot of people, because it's failing in many ways to provide education to people. And to me, it's just a giant waste, because you have so many administrators that are not needed to run these systems. Like, again, the schools that my kids go to right now, one of us at one campus, one's at the other campus. There's 3 total campuses. Each campus has a principal, But the entirety also has somebody in charge on top of that who gets a salary. Now, if those three schools just been underneath the Orleans Parish School Board instead of being their own, you wouldn't need that layer of bureaucracy there. That would be money that could have been spent in other ways, like, towards the education of children. That's why I don't like voucher systems. That's why I don't like going 100% charter. If you want to have some magnet schools or some specialty schools, you want the opportunity. If you want the opportunity to allow people to go and have separate, possibilities, like magnet schools, like language schools, math and science schools, fine arts schools, that's fine. I have no problem with that, because there are some people who might want more specialized education, who might benefit from a more specialized education. I like the fact that my kids are fluent in Spanish. I like the fact that they're going to have that tool in their tool belt when they grow up. Let's see. Coming from a family of educators, this subject does kill me. Absolutely. Accreditation only applies for public schools and the private schools that apply for it. Yep. But again, how many of these school systems, how many of these charter organizations, like the first school that my kid went to for pre-K is one charter with one. So there was a principal of that school, but there's also like the board and the president of the board. So that person probably is a paid position on top of the principal. So how many of these other school systems, like there's Arise, I think is one of them, and then there's another one that I forget what they're called. There's just so many of them that are just a clump of schools under one kind of umbrella. Then there are also all these individual ones that are created, and again, it creates additional layer. So how many of those exist, and how many millions of dollars of our taxpayer monies are being spent to have these administrators run these separate school systems inside the public school system of New Orleans? It's bizarre. Charter schools often say they don't test their kid without an observed need. We have to jump through certain hoops to deal with. If you want to get like a IEP or a 504 plan, you have to show some sort of a medical necessity from a doctor to start that process. But what was I going to say with that? I just completely lost my train of thought. But even then, and then they base their funding off of these standardized tests that don't really do a good job anyway of determining how good of a job they're being done. Like, my kid can get good grades, but then do poorly on a standardized test because of issues that my kid might have. So, let's see. Charter schools are an attempt to starve public funding for education and private. Absolutely, that's what they want to do. That's the ultimate goal, is to take every single federal dollar. They don't want to give it back to the people. They'll run on the idea that they want to give your tax money back, but in reality, they want to take the tax money and funnel it to their rich cronies. They want to take your tax dollars and fund it into private schools, even parochial schools, like one of the voucher schools in Louisiana that was you could use a voucher in, was a school that basically used the Loch Ness Monster to disprove evolution. Like, that's not a school that should be getting any sort of funding, federal funding, state funding, local funding, etc. Only people who should be funding that school are the people who want to pay to send their kids to such a school, and the people who are doing that probably aren't going to be too big on getting educated anyway. So, let's see. Charter schools are easier to rip off, less regulations than independent school districts. Republicans know this, absolutely. Lots of charter schools won't allow children with an IEP unless the public school system donates parent entry. Now, IEP doesn't necessarily mean that you have a physical disability. You could have other disabilities or other issues where like a learning issue that an IEP will cover. But if a charter school is found to not allow a child with an IEP, that school could get in trouble. But sometimes these school systems or these charter schools will manipulate the systems in such a way that it harms, the people and turns these schools into de facto private schools. Like, We don't have universal pre-K4 in Louisiana. So if you go to pre-K4, unless you have an IEP or unless you have like free or reduced school lunch, you might not, you'll have to pay to get into a pre-K4. So we had one charter school, I think it was Audubon Charter, which would basically say, okay, we're going to have pre-K4, and it's a paid pre-K4, and then everybody who's in pre-K4 gets to go into kindergarten automatically, and no need to deal with the one app. And the one app is the application that you put all your school choices in, and then you hope to get your one that you picked first in the lottery. But these people got to circumvent that because they got to pay for private school. They got to pay for their private pre-K4 school. So basically they turned the entirety of a charter school into a de facto private school where that's paid for by public funds, because the only people that could afford to go there are the people who could afford to pay for pre-K4. And then as such, you automatically moved up that way. Now they changed that. I think I've discussed this. I might have even discussed this last week. They've changed that in such a way to now for every pre-K4 class, you have to have 2 kindergarten classes. So they're only half private schools now. So you still get the people, if you can afford to get into pre-K4 in that school, you then still get to bypass the one app and get elevated. But they then offer like the next half of the incoming kindergarten class to be able to be people who do use the one app, which means you're less likely to be able to get into that school because there are less open slots available than your standard other charter school that would be able to handle more people if they didn't have a pre-K4. So it's just more manipulation. My school did it too. At first they didn't feel that they needed to provide busing because they were a type 2 charter. Turns out that was false, and then they had to start providing busing. It turns out that they were testing people to be language ready to come in for kindergarten. Well, that was against the rules. You have to allow open enrollment for anybody to come to your school for kindergarten. If for some reason they were to come in first grade and beyond, at that point you could test to see if they're language ready, to see if they could speak any Spanish at the beginning and therefore be able to come to school. But for kindergartners, no, you could not do that. Now my kid fortunately did take the language readiness test that my oldest one did and was deemed to be language ready, but by the time my younger went to the same school, that requirement no longer was in force. So boop 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 boop. Wes, yeah, social, emotional, educational disorders, mental illness, all IEPs. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I guess I should have said individual education plan is what IEP stands for. Basically, yeah, you have to, there's schools have to give, what's like MFP? What is MFP? I forget what MFP stands for. Minimum something. No, not money follows person. That's Medicaid. MFP. Come on. No, come on. NFP meaning in education. Minimum foundation. So there's another thing on minimum foundation program. All right, Louisiana believes. Under the minimum foundation program, Louisiana annually adopts a formula to equitably allocate funding to education to school districts. Funding through this program is provided to school districts as block grant after satisfying all mandated requirements. School districts have flexibility to spend the funding. There's another thing I'm looking for where it's not MFP or whatever. Yeah, KQB, many students with physical challenges have a section 504 instead of IEP. Yes, and there were bits and times where my son was speech delayed, so he had an IEP at the beginning. He tested out of speech therapy, but then he still had some ADHD going on. So then he got a 504 plan to deal with the ADHD requirements instead of an IEP. See, I found out one of my favorite teachers who thought behavior disorder classes had been decided a few years ago. Got to see her one last time. That's terrible. But yeah, basically everybody has the right to an education, and everybody has the right to have an education where all of their needs are met, and schools are required to meet all of those needs. And of course, when you have a public school system that is run by one board, you can streamline everything and basically say and make sure that all of the schools have all the capabilities that they need to be able to get what they need to have done to cover persons with IEP and persons with 504 plans. But when it comes to these charter schools and charter school systems and more administrators, there's more things you have to look into, and more ways that these schools can try and get away with providing with the things that they want to that they should be required to provide, or that are required technically to provide. So, modified assignments, accommodations, large text, or the wheelchair access. You have longer testing time to be able to take a test longer, to have more time, to have be given, taught, or may have a test taken in a small group where you have less distractions, stuff like that. So, let's see. Boom, 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 boom. No, that's not one. That's something I want to look for. But of course, I think the last thing, of course, I wanted to cover, which we covered a little bit last week, I think, is the whole challenge to mifepristone, where of course, it took place in Texas. And according to the article, according to ABC News, the judge hearing the case about the abortion pill seems to be sympathetic to the arguments that are being made by the anti-choice individuals, the people who want to have the FDA ruling saying that it was okay to prescribe these pills. They wanted to overrule that ruling. And I'm sitting there, and the judge did ask one important question. It was like, has there ever been a case where the court has overturned an FDA ruling? And the person one of the people behind the suit was saying that there needs to be a check on this pro-choice administration in FDA. Well, there is a check. It's Congress. Congress writes the laws, and then the administration implements the laws. And as such, the FDA is empowered to approve or deny any certain pills, and mifepristone has been a pill that's been around and being prescribed and has been safe and effective for 20 years. So this is just another attempt by these activist conservatives to get these cases heard in front of the activist conservative court, that is the Supreme Court, because what's going to happen here is that if this judge ultimately rules against the FDA and overturns it, it's going to go to probably the Fifth Circuit, which is in New Orleans, which is the most conservative and also pretty much the most wrong and overturned district there is in the appeals circuit. They'll go to the Court of Appeals at that point, and the Fifth District will probably, because it's super conservative, will probably uphold the ruling of the lower court, in which case the case will go to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court, who is an activist majority, is going to sit there and probably either rule 5-4, 6-3 that the FDA didn't have the authority to approve mifepristone, even though they did, and even though it was reasonably done, and that it's within their mandate to do so. But we have an activist conservative court, and of course when that ruling comes down from the Supreme Court, again, just like the school loan ruling, just like all the other rulings we're waiting on, we will tackle those. I'm sure if there's a ruling that comes from the Tennessee statement that people should not be able to solemnize weddings that they don't agree with, in violation of Lawrence v. Texas, not Lawrence v. Texas, that's the wrong one. Loving versus Virginia. Lawrence v. Texas is something different. Loving versus Virginia and Obergefell v. Hodges. You have, that law is in direct contradiction of those two rulings, but of course, because Justice Thomas said the quiet part out loud, we know that he doesn't support the logic behind the rulings of Obergefell and Loving and Lawrence and Griswold and all the other ones, and as such, the other ones it'll probably be written by Alito again, and it'll probably a horribly written ruling again where while reading it, I'll have to continuously bring up the quote, the text of the Ninth Amendment, like the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, because I have that readily available now, because the Ninth Amendment is the redheaded stepchild of the Bill of Rights, because conservatives don't ever want to think about it. Let's see, Elaresia, I have to sign off early, guys, morning appointment. Thank you, Elaresia, for coming. It's appreciated as always. Let's see, Elizabeth, my daughter's teacher in private schools thought multiplication tables were unnecessary in math. My daughter was out and had spring in public schools by fall. Very good. That is a good thing to do. I mean, yeah. Fortunately, the private school that I went to from 1st to 8th grade, wanted us to be educated. So, but these people who are teaching that shouldn't be teaching, these people who are trying to change what we teach, shouldn't be teaching. Shouldn't be involved in the educational system to begin with. And there's, of course, always the book bans, the things. Oh, these schools shouldn't have these books with pornography in them. Which books? What book is in a school? Give me an example of a book that's in a kindergarten that a kindergartner can go look and say, this is a book I want to check out at the library, and the librarian goes, oh yeah, sure, even though it has some adult material in it. Let us know. They can't tell us. They won't tell us because they're just regurgitating the garbage that other people have stated before them. Just like the whole woke culture. Well, can you define woke? No, they freeze up. There's a viral video going around on Twitter where somebody was like, can you define what woke means? And she's like, I can't do it in 15 seconds. Well, go ahead. I'll give you all the time you need. Define what woke is. And she couldn't do it because they don't know. They don't understand what the idea behind woke is. Woke just means things I don't like. That's what woke means to them. Let's see. Ken QB, same thing goes to private parochial schools. When I was a kid in Chicago, CPS trained their own teachers in city colleges. Could not teach out of the city. West, lots of nuns and priests are very well educated. Well, yeah, but I mean, still, some of them aren't. Let's see. P-Dubs, my mom sent me to a Catholic school. In the 8th grade, I was not amused. I mean, mine was a Jewish school. I was a Jewish school from 1st grade to 8th grade, and I was the first graduating 8th grade class. It was me and some other dude, Gabe, and we our Disney trip was our I guess senior trip, our 8th grade trip was to Disney World because I'd never gotten to go to Disney World before. So, anywho. And of course, there's the whole thing about, with education and people fighting Common Core or what. I had a memory about Common Core or whatever, and people opposed to it and opposed to what goes on with it or whatever. But, there's a lot of, I guess, misunderstanding about what Common Core is. Of course, there is a circumstance in Common Core where it goes and it follows the whole Animal Farm 1984 thing where the answer to 2 + 2 is 5. And that's the thing that the Animal Farm 1984 folks will say, hey, they'll convince you that 2 + 2 = 5. And apparently it does if you're rounding to the closest 5. So that's what they kind of teach you when they teach you with rounding. Of course, sometimes when they're dealing with rounding, it's not necessarily described in the best way. I actually found trying to help my wife study for the GRE, and I was going over the answers to the test that she took, and I was looking at the answer key, and I was like, this is wrong. And I messaged the author, and I was like, you're aware that this answer is wrong? And he's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Yes, it should say this. And so I basically corrected the author of a book on why his book didn't give the correct answer on a particular thing, when he was talking about rounding and he didn't mention rounding. He was, I was supposed to be about rounding, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I missed something to scroll on me. Julie Swenson, my sister used abortion drugs to a blighted ovum, no fetus, but a growing embryonic sac that was not resolving on its own. It infuriates me to think that women will be denied these vital drugs. Well, that's the whole thing behind the lawsuit. The lawsuit where the 3 or 5 women are suing the state of Texas simply because they want a better understanding as to when they can get an abortion when it comes to their life being threatened. Because as it seems to be written right now, and as these hospital administrators are interpreting the law, they have to force these people to wait until it becomes like septic. Like, it's not enough to say, if we allow this pregnancy to continue, it will be septic and be life-threatening. Apparently that's not enough. And of course, the people that write the laws like, oh no, that's not what we meant. But you should have written it better then, if that's not what you meant, because that's what these administrators are basically saying. These administrators are basically saying, look, we're not going to perform these abortions because we don't want to put ourselves at legal risk, because we believe that the way the law is written, that it requires somebody to have to be in a life and death situation in order to be able to obtain an abortion, which is ridiculous. Because in reality, like, for example, like a prolonged miscarriage, like water broke on this one woman earlier, and she had to sit home alone or sit home and wait for the sepsis to kick in order for her to be able to go back and get the procedure that she needed. Or there was another one where the doctor basically said, look, I didn't tell you this, but you need to go to another state because you need the health care, but you're not going to be able to get it done here because Texas laws are so backwards. Anywho, so this, and again, yeah, also very pro-life of them. Exactly, Julie. Exactly. They're not pro-life. They are pro-force. They're pro-forced birth. They are pro-control. They are not pro-life. If they are pro-life, they would have worn masks. If they are pro-life, they would have gotten vaccines. If they were pro-life, they wouldn't have fought social distancing. If they were pro-life, they would make sure that people who do give birth are able to get adequate health care for the not only prenatal care, but adequate health care for the infant that is born. They would make sure that people would be able to wouldn't fight people getting fed food stamps. You know, there's so many ways that they disprove their being pro-life that, you know, but they don't care, because to them it's all about the babies. Like, I remember that. I remember one time when I was campaigning on the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain in the 1st Congressional District when I was running for Congress back in 2004. We were talking. I stopped and talked to this couple. We were having me and the husband seemed to have a pretty reasonable conversation. I was talking about why I think that I could represent the whole district, the issues that I have, the issues that I feel that are the most important to the district and to Louisiana. And the wife chimed in and said, all I care about is the babies. I'm like, okay, you have a nice day. Because there's no way at that point that I'm going to be able to get through to either of you, because all you're going to do is that, are you supporting of abortion or not? Yeah, oh, well, then you go to hell. Let's see. There are 2 family members right now that are pregnant. I'm terrified for them. I mean, I would have loved to have a daughter, but I'm glad we have sons, because, you know, I don't have to worry about focusing on their body autonomy for the vast majority of it. I can spend my time fighting to protect other people's body autonomy, because they're not having government coming after them at this point. So I get to use my efforts and promote other people's rights instead of having to worry about my kids being trampled on. Of course, they're half Jewish, so of course I have to worry about that, because, you know, the one thing that we did see over the weekend, let's see, of course it was Florida. Let's see, where in Florida was it? I think it was Florida. Florida neo-Nazis projected a swastika on downtown buildings, saying that the hysteria over drag queens is helping them recruit people. So neo-Nazis are getting more recruits because people are crying about drag queens. We've coddled Nazis far too much. The neo-Nazi group told NPR that the anti-drag hysteria is helping them recruit members. Group has projected anti-Semitic and hateful messages on the Florida buildings. Other white nationalist groups have been using uproar over LGBTQ support issues to drum up support. So, because people hate people who are gay, and because people hate people who are trans, and people hate people who are drag performers, it's going to help bolster and raise the popularity of neo-Nazi groups that are going to also hate people who are Jewish and hate people who are black, or hate people that are not white. Cynthia from Texas. If a girl is raped, got pregnant, has complications, dies, will the rapist get charged with murder? No, they won't. Because conservatives don't give a crap about the responsibility of the person who donated the sperm, regardless if that sperm was donated or not. Rape is, you can't get an abortion simply because of rape in many of these new state laws. They don't make exceptions for rape. It's like, too bad, have the child. We don't care if you're a victim. Too bad. Like, of course, I mean, I always have to preface this with, I support abortion without exception. I am pro-abortion on demand. That's it. Like, that's ultimately what the government has no role in it, except for, again, telling any place that performs a surgery or any sort of procedure that it has to have certain standards of cleanliness. Like, it has to, you have to be sterile. Like, I think that's a reasonable regulation to have on any place that's performing a medical procedure. But after that, it should be between the doctor and the person who's pregnant as to what happens. The state shouldn't have any role in it. But that being said, I don't understand the people who would force a pregnancy if somebody is raped. I don't understand these people who make people jump through hoops to try and get an abortion if they're in a life-threatening condition, or even a potential life-threatening condition. The fact that you have to, again, force a pregnant person to wait until the need is dire before getting it. Because, like, the Louisiana law is worded in such a way that says you have to be at risk of permanently losing major body function. So if you would permanently lose minor body function, or if you would temporarily lose major body function but it would come back, you then could not still get an abortion, even if it's going to cause you to lose some function of your body. Which is absurd, and I'm mad at Edwards for signing it. Now, Edwards tried to basically make the law as palatable as he could when it comes to other things, like he made sure it was worded in implantation and not conception, so therefore there'd be no argument as to whether or not the morning after pill is allowed, even though the morning after pill doesn't stop implantation. Yeah. But he still signed the law, and he shouldn't have had to. Of course, if he didn't sign the law, it would have been overturned anyway, because there's enough people in the gerrymandered Louisiana legislature that would have signed it into law, even though the last year there wasn't. They were one shy on the trans bill that would have prevented trans women from participating in women's sports in high schools and lower, because one person held out. One Republican was like, no, I'm not going to overturn this veto. And it caused the veto to be successful. But then the next year, that very same person voted to overturn the veto. And as such, the stupid anti-trans law was passed as well. They get to determine what pieces of people are valued by them. Absolutely. Let's see. My ex had a great uncle who was in World War II. He would not talk about it to them. He told me about things he saw. Let's see. Elizabeth says the government should be charged with negligent homicide. I think that would be good, but how could you do that? Like wrongful death. Like, could you get a wrongful death suit against the state because they put in a system of laws that prevented somebody from saving their own lives? That's the thing. Like, it's the hypocritical thing of conservatism. As the host of the most Nimbus Yosh with the smooth sounds of the Percy podcast will say, hypocrisy is a conservative prerequisite. So they will fight tooth and nail for gun rights. I remember seeing an argument just on Twitter before I came live for some conversation about Joe Biden and increased regulations on gun sales. And Carrie Lake said, what about shall not be infringed, don't you understand? Of course, I responded to her by saying, what about a well-regulated militia, don't you understand? But somebody else responded, well, if you don't have the right to protect your own life, you don't have liberty. Well, you are not free if you don't have the right to protect your own life. Well, if somebody who's pregnant doesn't have the right to protect their own lives from a life-threatening pregnancy, then they're not free by that very definition. But they are absolutely hypocritical because they won't make that argument. They won't allow that argument. They'll only allow the argument when it comes to guns. That's probably the guy that said it too. Again, because conservatism. Conservatives don't like to be told what to do, and conservatives love to tell other people what to do. So, again, thank you to Aaron and Jolie for sharing P-Dubs' Paddywhack's link to the GoFundMe. If you haven't if you can support, please support. If you can share, please share. I would really appreciate it, and I would want anybody on who listens to the show, who's a listener, if you're having problems, I want to do whatever it is that we can do to, like, if we can put the minds of Liberal Dan Radio together and get somebody a job, awesome. If we could get our minds together and help them get something else accomplished, awesome. I think we could do amazing things together as a group, and I'd love to be able to help every single one of you when I can. So if you can do whatever it is you help, do whatever it is to help, be it pay and or share on social media if you can't. That being said, also, I guess, small reset before we end, I suppose. Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. Again, support the show, patreon.com/liberaldan, patreon.liberaldan.com. Both will give you there. That's a way to support the show monthly. You can also go to go to liberaldan.com, click the Buy Me a Cider button. That'll buy me a one-time cider, or you can also contribute to my Venmo as well. It's at liberaldan at Venmo. You're welcome, P-Dubs. I appreciate you. I appreciate every one of y'all. I love the fact that we have a regular group of people that come on and we can all enjoy and discuss the issues together and have a good time whilst doing it. Let's see, Wes. The all-new math, I was dealing with fifth graders. Many had school over the years, both languages, but some came straight from Mexico. They were grouped by age. I must have missed something as part of that. You're welcome, Elizabeth. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and call this one a night. I think we're... I'm out of drink. I'm out of beverage, and I want to go wet my whistle with some water or whatever. Again, I will be on tomorrow evening on Twitch, twitch.tv/nerdydan.com. I'll be playing games, but again, we can chat about anything you want to chat about. If we end up not playing a game and just talking about stuff, that's cool too. I'm fine with that as well. If you want to just talk about random subjects and we get distracted from the games, that's fine. I'm more than happy to do that. It's more of a fun hour or 2 or 3, depending on how long I'm sitting there and playing. Also depends on how many viewers we have. The more viewers I have, the more likely I am to keep it going, because I do get ad revenue, some, and I do get, I guess, subscription money as well, and bits or whatever. And again, if you have Amazon Prime, you can always subscribe for no additional cost to you every month, and it doesn't cost you extra. It gives me extra money. It's win-win, right? So, what else? I think that's about it. So let me. I have to talk a little bit more whilst I'm scrolling to try and find the ending clip of the show, because I didn't plan this out accordingly. I should put this all the way on top so I don't have to scroll down each and every show end. Aaron requests Dreamlight Valley. Maybe I'll do some Dreamlight Valley tomorrow. We will see. I don't think I have anything new coming up with Fortnite, so how about that? I will start off tomorrow playing Disney's Dreamlight Valley because Aaron requested it, and I'm a good host. And this is the end of this week's episode of Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. I will be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, here on YouTube, Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube. You can also, again, follow, subscribe to my Twitch channels as well, twitch.tv/nerdydan.com, Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, facebook.com/liberaldan, and facebook.com/liberaldan radio. Both will work. 2 different pages. I'm trying to build the other one up as well. Try and share the videos to the channels. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Give me a like, etc. as well. Until next week, this is Dan Zimmerman with Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right.